Despite an absolutely awful episode of Hot Ones,
it's great.
There's a lot of heat on Shane Gillis's saucy little nipples at the minute. The main thing that stands out to me about Gillis is his delivery. Gillis maintains his regular guy energy in the most irregular of circumstances, creating the back and forth banter we'd usually see on a drunken night out. So let's talk about how Gillis makes his act feel natural, off the cuff, and distinct from the rest of the Joe Rogan chum bucket. When Gillis walks on stage, there's no massive change to his personality. He doesn't flick into performance mode in a super jarring way. Instead, Gillis looks like someone who has been dared to do stand-up. He's low-key, a little nervy, setting a red cup on a stool as if he's just wandered away from a frat party. As Khalifa Senna described in The New Yorker, Gillis would walk on stage, grab the microphone, and say matter-of-factly, "Hell yeah." It made him seem less like a performer than like a friendly guy at the bar, one whom audience members already knew. You can see this energy in this early set. He greets the audience with a casual, "Yeah," wearing a hoodie, beer in hand. The craziest thing is how normal it feels. There's no neediness or pretension. The line between audience and performer is effectively non-existent. I particularly loved this one moment.
By the weed posters, there's one of the Frisbees on. We're all like in our 30s.
There is something oddly endearing about it. It's totally thrown away. He laughs at the joke himself, stares at the ground, fiddles with his jumper. The impression is of a mate who, yes, is going to tell some jokes and stories, but has no real interest in performing stand-up. It's this lack of performance that makes Gillis so refreshing. Look at the way he holds the mic. Me and Daniel Koftree have a theory that the further down the comedian holds the microphone, the more relaxed they want to appear. Chill. Very relaxed. Psychopath! Gillis's contemporaries all hold the mic with one hand, giving off the vibe of cool, authoritative control. Yet Gillis holds it like a total newbie. He keeps one hand behind his back or holds the mic with both. It's disarming, awkward, there's a shyness to it. He's not trying to dominate the stage like Tom Segura or Joe Rogan. He's not heightening his personality like Theo Vaughn in Regular People. He looks much more like some regular guy than a natural performer. When Gillis finishes a routine, he doesn't slyly segue onto the next topic. Instead, he pauses or walks back to his cup and takes a long drink. It's intentionally clunky and brings attention to the performance itself.
Oh, 9/11 joke. That's an applause break. Bravo!
It's become entrenched in comedy lore that the best comedians are the ones who make it look effortless. They move between subjects with slick precision, never bringing attention to the mechanisms at play.
You really have to put all this time into it to make it look like you're coming up with it off the top of your head.
Which is where Gillis steps in. Gillis has no interest in trying to maintain the illusion that it's all coming off the top of his head. He is a guy telling jokes, and in these little moments he embraces an awkwardness that feels more real, vulnerable, and less performative than his peers. Look, it's not Bo Burnham or Stuart Lee. He's not deconstructing the art form.
My show is very planned to the word, to the gesture. And I'm trying to break out of that.
But the things that make stand-up feel most performative, he draws attention to, instead of trying to hide. This makes his act feel more real and more like genuine conversation. It's a smart, subtle breaking of the fourth wall that makes Gillis's stage persona feel much closer to his real self.
Yes. All right, enough of this cum talk. I'll tell you, this was making me laugh.
Maintaining this feeling of casual conversation is how Gillis underwrites his jokes. Which I mean in the best possible way. Comedy is a written discipline, but I think a lot of comedians overwrite their material, to the point where it feels contrived. Take this joke from comparable comedian Tim Dillon.
When's the last time you left a drive-thru and you're like, I hope I'm on the same page with all of them? I hope the gnarled hand giving me that quesadilla shares my values. Does that bearded woman with an eye patch feel the same way I do about Israel?
The joke is well written, but that's the thing, it's written. There's a clear structure, use of synonym comedy, these constant repetitions hammering the punchline home. Wait, what the hell is synonym comedy? Well, not to give the game away for a future video, but synonym comedy is a term I heard Pete Holmes use to describe a comedian varying their vocabulary to create more punchlines. Dylan's joke comprises the same basic idea, but each time he describes it a different way. This turns one punchline into three. However, there's a mechanical element to it. Matt Rife uses this technique in a special I wish I never saw when talking about women and crystals. How far can my eyes roll before they come out of the socket?
This crystal shit is getting out of control. Ladies, put the fucking pebbles down, okay? We are sick and tired of walking into your bedroom and it looking like we gotta beat you at a game of Mancala before we can sleep with you. What the fuck is all this gravel doing inside, Thanos?
You know what I mean, it just feels labored, like, okay, we get it. Gravel? Somebody's used a thesaurus. Audiences are subconsciously aware when a comedian is moving through the sound and rhythm of a joke. Even though it works, it feels performed rather than off the cuff. With this in mind, listen to this joke by Gillis.
Gay Vikings, dude. You're just some villager looking out on the shoreline. You see a bunch of Viking longships coming. You're like, oh no. It's the Vikings. They're gonna rape our wives and daughters. Then they pull up their fucking rainbow flag on their boat, and you're just like, oh, fuck. Oh, that's way worse.
This is beautifully underwritten. There's almost a norm quality to it. The most specific word is longships, which only has 2 syllables. Even in the setup, Gillis's repetition of Vikings rings of a slight clunkiness, as if he were making it up on the spot.
See a bunch of Viking longships coming. You're like, oh no. It's the Vikings.
The punchline and tag are bare bones. They do the same thing as Dylan's punchline, repeating the same sentiment twice, but the wording is so much simpler.
Oh, fuck. Oh, that's way worse.
Tim Dillon's use of language betrays the regular schmo he's pretending to be. Gillis's enhances it. You'll see this in nearly every joke Gillis performs, where there are opportunities to make a punchline feel more written. Gillis swerves the other way, using extremely simple language to get his point across.
It's official. I've been to like 3 other countries. It's official. And other countries hate it too. They hate that we're number 1. You ever tell them? You ever go to another country and tell them we're number 1? Swim up to like a pool bar, just... You know, we're number 1.
One of the reasons Live in Austin struck such a chord was the resounding lack of polish. Gillis doesn't set his jokes up smoothly. He repeats words and phrases, abandons sentences halfway through. It feels like a guy telling you a story in real time, instead of a performer running through rehearsed material.
But I will say this about Trump. I don't want you guys to I don't want to turn this into a rally. I don't want you to...
This comes through in the punchlines, which feel like instinctive reactions instead of wordy sentences that have been labored over in a notebook. When he's roasting Ari Shaffir, he cuts to the chase in the bluntest possible way.
Ari is edgy and shocking, which is a really cool thing for a 50-year-old guy to be.
When he's talking about Donald Trump being assassinated, he boils his reaction down to a single funny noise.
Like he'd get hit, be like, ah, and fall. He'd fall funny.
He also does something here which I haven't really heard in comedy, where he'll simply say something is funny and carry on.
Just coughing. Coughing during sex is funny.
It's pretty much comedy law that to get a joke to work, you take an idea and expand upon it. You find a different angle and attack again. What Gillis does is an act of quiet defiance. He doesn't feel the need to explain himself. These things are funny, you get the idea, let's keep going. It makes his act feel like a friend cracking banter instead of a comedian laboring over a premise. It's worth tapping into the wider context of comedy we're in at the moment. Gillis has accrued a massive fan base through Matt and Shane's Secret podcast, and many of those fans come to his shows.
I understand most of the women here are girlfriends that were dragged to this show. that already don't really like me because every time they're in their car, their boyfriend's like, babe, listen to this part of the podcast.
Gillis is one of the first big acts to embrace the rhythm and cadence of comedy podcasts on stage. The feeling of naturalism, calling attention to bits, commenting on someone who has said something funny, sloppy riffing. These are hallmarks not of stand-up, but two guys trying to crack each other up on a podcast. We'll talk about this more later, but this is a huge part of Gillis's appeal, especially compared to others who have very distinct lines between who they are in the podcast studio and on stage. Now, could you accuse Gillis of a little bit of laziness? Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Do I think there are places where he could mine a little deeper and extrude a few extra laughs? Yeah, I do. This joke about a furry drone striker seems insanely underdeveloped.
Operating drones that thinks he's a fucking dog, just... Oh! You know how fucking scary that guy is?
But you can't deny the chaotic spontaneity that comes in its place. It's worth mentioning Gillis probably performed this material hundreds of times. The temptation to tinker, to make the punchlines more exact, to force the jokes a little more, would be hard to resist. You can see this in Dylan's joke, which seems to have solidified through constant repetition. It feels rote and lacks the in-the-moment madness that comes through in his podcast.
You should be watching Plandemic!
For Gillis's acts to feel as simple and messy as it does, for him to leave the jokes alone and trust the audience to find the essence of what makes them funny is credit to him as a performer. I would much rather Gillis make a riff that feels underdeveloped but organic, instead of being pummeled over the head with patronizing, repetitive Andrew Schultz punchlines.
I got crop circles on your fucking sheets. You see that shit? I might not make you come, I'll make you do laundry, that's a fact. I do a load, you do a load. That's how things work around here. Guys, thank y'all so much, man. Thank y'all so much.
This wouldn't mean anything if Gillis wasn't able to create an immediate connection with his audience. I stumbled across this passage from Jesse David Fox's excellent comedy book about Janeane Garofalo. I think it captures the spirit of Gillis's act. She speaks in a stream of consciousness, with punchlines sneaking their way into what comes off as a caffeinated hang. Garofalo expects the audience to understand exactly what she means when she describes people by their pop culture taste.
Seriously, how uncool is David Copperfield? Seriously. Because David Copperfield is really under the impression that he's incredibly cool. And that has blown my mind. And he's so blown, don't look into my eyes. It's just, whoosh. It's just, and he's with Claudia Schiffer, which is so much that, you know who Claudia Schiffer's favorite band is? Foreigner. Isn't that just the way? But you know what, so what? She's so what? She's still the most popular, so what? She likes Foreigner.
I know I say in the first chapter that all comedians are trying to recreate the feeling of mirth you have hanging out with your friends. But throughout the special, Garofalo really speaks to her audience the way you would talk with your friends. It's all rapid-fire shared references that you don't have to explain. Her best material feels like inside jokes. Replace the caffeine with a couple warm Bud Lights and you've got a perfect description of Gillis's act. Let's look at a moment Gillis uses to establish an immediate rapport with his audience.
That's what I like about them. They're just down there. Zero exports. Creating nothing, dude. They're doing, the only export I've seen come out of Australia is just that YouTube video of that guy punching that kangaroo in the face. Yeah.
He doesn't even finish the sentence. As soon as he gets that laugh of recognition, he moves on. My favorite thing about the joke is it doesn't sound like a joke. It just feels like a guy telling you about a funny video, like someone would do at work or in a bar. It's relaxed, and coming a few minutes into his set, it's Gillis welcoming you into his space, establishing intimacy. What makes Gillis crafty, however, is he does set the joke up, just not in a way that's immediately noticeable.
You know that video, that kangaroo holding that dog hostage out in the woods?
Gillis saying you know that video while also describing the video creates the feeling of inside jokes while providing all the context necessary to make the joke work. It's telling that the punchline is...
Guy just fucking... If you've seen the video, you know how good that impression is.
This is where Gillis leverages the dynamic in his favor. Now he has everyone on board, the punchline relies on the audience laughing not at the impression, but the common knowledge of what the impression is referring to. This is expert crowd manipulation. In 20 seconds, Gillis has established a common knowledge with the audience, made everyone feel included in that conversation, and used that common knowledge to generate a massive laugh.
You son of a bitch.
Even if you haven't seen the video, Gillis has made you feel like you're part of the group. He's ushered you in, handed you a beer. You feel you know this guy. And even if you don't know precisely what he's talking about, you want to laugh with him.
Hey, pal, what can I do you for? Free drinks, what do you have?
He does this again when he's talking about Al-Qaeda's rickety lack of equipment.
Those dudes, they had one set of monkey bars. That's what they all trained on. And they were proud of the monkey bars. You remember that video? You've seen them using the monkey bars.
Listen to how he sets this up. He asks you if you've seen it. He pauses briefly as if he's waiting for you to nod your head. Then he insists.
And they were proud of the monkey bars. You remember that video? You've seen them using the monkey bars.
It's a low-key psychological trick. It's like a bro version of The Mentalist. You have seen them using the monkey bars. You have seen them using the monkey bars. It sounds like a Beatle. Ringo, you have seen them using the monkey bars. Now let's play Hey Jude. These little moments, the rhetorical question followed by the affirmation, create the feeling of dynamic conversation, where Gillis is rolling off your reactions and nothing needs to be explained. But again, if we look at the joke as a whole, Gillis is peppering in details to get everyone on board.
No training. Zero military training, dude. Those dudes, they had one set of monkey bars. That's what they all trained on.
This is the difference between Gillis and someone like Tom Segura. When Segura makes an inside joke,
you don't know people that like a couple beers? Is it always, I like to drink 36? Okay, good for you, Bert.
The inside joke is the joke. Anyone unfamiliar with Bert Kreischer and his terrible shtick won't get the joke and feel excluded. This, in my opinion, makes it a bad joke. It's just a reference you're either going or not going to get.
I thought my jokes were bad.
Gillis's talent is not for performing inside jokes, but recreating the atmosphere we hear them in. He's made everyone feel included, and his delivery is so giddy and conversational that it simply feels like part of the banter. It's not about the jokes, but the person telling them. And Gillis creates such a feeling of beer pong 5 beers in intimacy that we want to laugh at whatever he says.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine.
We don't know what you're watching, so we're not going to tell you. We're going to return you to it.
Oh, we're watching animal porn. Mary had a little lamb. We'll be right back in just a second.
It never feels like Gillis is entirely in control. There's always an element of chaos. Where an act like Tom Segura is very on rails, he does his act as written, barely improvises, then leaves, Gillis wants to throw himself off balance. He is willing to abandon his material and improvise with the crowd's reactions. It's worth comparing Gillis to Louis C.K., and before we go any further, Gillis opened this door. C.K. is Gillis's hero, a major influence, and arguably a mentor.
Who are comedians you look at that kind of like you look up to the most?
Louis. Who?
CK?
Yeah. And I was obsessed with him. That was the guy. That's who I wanted
He's the
to be.
pinnacle?
Yeah. I think he's the best comedian.
Of all time?
In my opinion, yeah. He's my favorite.
Who's in your top 5?
You guys low-key sound a lot alike, too.
Yeah, I copied him.
Did you really?
Definitely.
When it comes to how they create the feeling of spontaneity on stage, CK is an important point of comparison. However, I'll be honest, I feel weird talking about Louis CK, not just because of his abuse and his clear abuse of power, but how he's masked this abuse in his comedy, and how he's been re-embraced by podcasters like Gillis over the past couple years. I know I've used clips of Louis in previous videos and mentioned him a few times, but this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Everyone has a line in the sand, and turns out this is mine. For clarity, if Gillis wasn't so clearly inspired by CK, I wouldn't be talking about him, and if you don't want to hear me talk about him, skip to here to go to the next bit. Right, now I've buried one of my heroes, let's get back into my upbeat narration voice. Yay! Louis creates the impression of free-flowing conversation, but he knows every part of it.
When I do it, I'm sputtering through it.
Yeah,
and sweaty anger and energy. I try to make it seem like I'm just getting this out, but I know all the moves. I know every little piece of it.
Gillis doesn't know all the moves. He's not manipulating the audience as hard as Louis. Think how he derails his SNL monologue when the jokes aren't landing.
Look, I don't have any material that can be on TV, all right? I'm trying my best. Also, this place is extremely well lit. I can see everyone not enjoying it. This is, just the most nervous I've ever been. Don't clap now, shut up.
Louis, think of the pedophile routine, would never break the fourth wall like this. Gillis isn't as disciplined as Louis in terms of knowing all the beats to his jokes, and his riffing can get him into hot water. I actually think the SNL set is a good example of how improvising can create a static awkwardness with the crowd. However, Gillis's performances have a charm because they're more chaotic and improvised.
Look, this joke's probably not gonna make it, but here's what all right, hear this one out. I'm gonna try. If you see it, just know I won an argument.
Again, it prioritizes authenticity over performed rigor. Yes, it loses some of the tightness and polish, but it feels like a shared experience, something happening in the moment. Moving his stand-up closer to free-flowing conversation because for chunks of each performance, well, it is.
Like, Jesus Christ. I do comedy a lot, and every once in a while you can hear music from another room, and it's like, damn, dude, music's so much better than comedy. Every time I hear music, I'm like, fuck, dude, that shit crushes what I do. Some fucking idiot dressed like Cam Newton pressing play. It's so much better than this.
This is aided by these big, baked-out pauses. It's become a trademark, two hands raised, antagonizing the audience, or messing with them, the way you'd try to get a rise out of your friends.
Because of my privilege, and I used it.
More importantly, these gaps create the illusion of conversation. I love this moment in Austin where he's segueing into the funniest presidential assassination. Howdy. I can't get this clip to not have copyright issues when I upload it.
I've tried shifting the pitch.
I've tried adding background noise, weird filters, nothing's working. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna lip sync the audio with my voice. So you'll still get the idea, but it will sound a bit weird.
Technically, there's a funniest of everything.
There is. Does make it funny, but there is like...
Think of the worst thing you can think of. There's a funniest one. I'll go first. I'll think of one.
The delivery is golden. The eye contact, the little bit of baiting, the cheeky smile, saying I'll go first is a brilliant recreation of social dynamics.
I'll go first. I'll think of one.
The reality is, of course Gillis will go first. He's the only one talking. He's the comedian. But Gillis turns this into a loaded silence between friends, where he volunteers himself because no one else has spoken up. Gillis does this a lot, inserting pauses into his acts to make it feel like the audience has an opportunity to speak. When the audience says nothing, which they shouldn't, their role is to be silent.
Shut the fuck up! Do you know what shut the fuck up mean?
Gillis plays with that tension, maximizing the eventual punchline. Here's the cool thing. If someone does call out, Gillis is quick enough to make a joke on the fly. It's a win-win. Audience says nothing, Gillis plays with their silence. Audience does say something, well, it was part of the plan all along. These moments make it feel like Gillis is talking to one person as opposed to thousands. It's like a mini heckler amnesty every few minutes.
Think of any army throughout history. Imagine them gay. Gay Nazis? Just when you thought those guys couldn't look any sharper, they...
What I love best about this is it feels more organic than crowd work. Crowd work is a forced interaction that the comedian initiates. Not only is it incredibly widespread, but it also takes time and interrupts the flow of a set. Also, it's a bit obvious, isn't it? Oh, you want to create the feeling of conversation with the crowd? I know what you can do. Talk to the crowd. Besides this, there's often a clear difference between a comedian's crowd work and their material, and their transitions between the two are clunky at best.
Step at Denny's, bro. They got a bunch of child molesters over there. Y'all got Denny's here? Fuck Denny's, bro.
Akash Singh struggles with this. His crowd work is undeniably good, but he struggles to recreate that life when he transitions into his actual set.
You guys have kids? How many?
2.
2, that's beautiful. Boy and girl?
Yes.
Okay, good. My wife and I also are trying to have a baby.
I would struggle in the middle of my act. Dom said, "You know what's wrong with your act, right?" I go, "No. Can you help me?" And he said, "Yeah, you can't follow yourself. Your crowd work's way too good. Your material's not funny enough."
Gillis avoids this awkwardness by getting the crowd involved on their terms. It doesn't feel forced because he's not forcing the interaction. He simply leaves a gap, like a line in the water, and sees if an audience member will bite. For a comic who doesn't do any crowd work in either special, he creates a real back and forth. These bursts of interaction and improvisation inject so much life and momentum into his written material.
We know we're not the coolest guys around. It's the foreign whites, dude. There's a, yeah, yes! Preach, brother! Yeah.
The way Gillis treats his audience generally is interesting. CK, who wants to perform each routine exactly, is ruthless with hecklers. He says out loud his performances are rhetorical.
What? Thank you. Maybe tell me that later instead of during a performance. So, you're not welcome to speak. I'm trying to make that really clear.
Again, he gives the illusion of conversation, but if someone chimes in, he shatters this illusion. There is no play with the audience. Louis is above the audience.
So, I don't care about her. Shut up, idiot. Just shut your fucking mouth. Did you hear me before?
Gillis is the opposite. When someone yells out, he doesn't shut them down, beat his chest, and reinforce his alpha status in the audience performer hierarchy. He treats his audience as equals and enjoys their input. Sometimes he even positions himself lower than the audience, making himself the butt of the joke.
Sometimes I like to visit like historical places throughout the country. So a couple summers ago, don't laugh at that. Shut up, dude, it's not lame at all. I just laughed at me from the balcony. Dork.
Louis is happy to let the mask slip, tell the audience they're idiots, then go back into performance mode. For Gillis, there is no performance mode. It all blends together. The experience is collaborative. He's happy with a bit of anarchy and trusts his audience to call out without overstepping their bounds. Gillis is less precious about his material and more focused on creating a fun vibe. There's a lack of ego, which compared to many of his contemporaries is incredibly refreshing. It's breaking down the audience-performer relationship and getting closer to just a bunch of dudes hanging out.
Where do you sit the hot ladies?
Yeah, there's no women. It's just dudes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. All my shows are for dudes, unfortunately. Yeah.
Gillis is so good at fostering an atmosphere of dudes just hanging out, we're much more willing to follow him into more traditional territory. When he makes callbacks, they don't point out their cleverness. Rather, they have the spontaneous simplicity of a guy making a connection in real time.
I was like that fucking kangaroo.
They're also underwritten, which, as we've said, helps.
Now I'm in there fucking...
He constantly cracks up at his own jokes, a technique many comedians exploit to enhance weak punchlines. Not looking at anyone in particular, yet it rarely comes across as anything other than Gillis having a good time. It's simply the seasoning that makes his material pop. Yeah, I've seen The Bear. Is it all in good taste? No. For all the good things I've said about Gillis, there are examples where he uses these techniques to get away with weak punchlines or prop up lazy premises. He has a penchant for using trigger words, then hiding behind his dumb Republican bro persona. And before you say anything, I know there is a satirical underpinning, that he's saying these jokes ironically. But sometimes it really feels like Gillis just wants to call something gay or retarded because he knows it'll get a reaction.
Ari's yoga videos suck and are gay.
It demonstrates how underwriting getting jokes can lead Gillis to indulge in shitty impulses and lazy shock factor that panders to his audience while alienating others.
You know how autistic people are extremely uncomfortable in social settings? Let's stick a camera in these fucking retards' face and watch them fight.
This is coupled with just the worst puns. For every high concept joke that walks a tightrope of acceptability, there's a pun so lame it'd make Andrew Schultz cringe.
It was rough. Queer. The Paw Patrol, the actual Paw Patrol.
You know, it's hard to make a video about how good a comedian's delivery is when he uses that delivery to make a "that's rough" pun in the middle of his set. That's like using a rocket launcher to fire a Nerf dart.
For real, that was an accident.
While it can work brilliantly, Gillis can use his pausing as a crutch.
Trump gave what I think was probably one of the greatest speeches a world leader's given. You know, it's got to be up there with like Churchill, Gettysburg Address. Anyway.
These moments are really on the nose and trollish. It just feels like Gillis is baiting the audience into a cheap laugh. I'd rather Gillis allow the audience to see the irony as he performs the joke, instead of so obviously trying to bait them from the start.
We're not gonna let human trafficking define these guys, are we? Huh? I don't know. Anyway. Hey, I don't think that's very funny.
Also, you know how I said Gillis's laugh never feels like the joke itself? Well, I lied. His laughter is occasionally used to bolster a weak punchline, as we can see here with the help of a lovely little audience cutaway.
Here's the keys to the safe. Take everything. I love you. You guys, you crazy bitches. I love you bitches. That's it.
There's a good argument that Gillis's bro at the bar energy lowers the audience's expectations. If Joe Rogan ended a special on a Paw Patrol pun, he would be rightfully roasted alive. But because Gillis creates the feeling of hanging out with a mate, the audience sets their expectations at that level. They give him more leniency, which at times Gillis undeniably exploits. It's something Gillis needs to keep tabs on. He should hold himself to a higher standard and stop cutting corners, especially if he wants to be considered a great comedian. However, he is, by far, the most interesting comedian of his pack. If you'll indulge me, let's return to the parallel between podcasting and stand-up I mentioned earlier. When it comes to stand-up, many podcast comedians leave me cold. Andrew Santino, Theo Vaughn, and Tim Dillon are hilarious, unpredictable podcast wizards.
When we find someone to be yellow, what are they?
Chinese?
Not Chinese. Over to the Chinese kid.
Cowardly.
But when they walk on stage, something is missing. The heightening of their personas, the screeds of rehearsed material. It feels like they're performing comedy at you instead of creating it with you. The freewheeling spontaneity that makes their podcast so good has been replaced with lifeless comedy nuggets.
Where we've kind of agreed to it. And outside of these walls, it's a different set of rules. But in here, for some reason, it's not. It's strange. Like, what's your name? What's your name? Brian? Brian, you having a fun time tonight? Yeah?
Gillis doesn't feel like this. He doesn't come across as some uncanny exaggeration, nor does it feel like he's delivering an uninterrupted monologue. His act is entangled with the awkward, improvised, chaotic energy of a drunken conversation. He creates familiarity and intimacy with his audience, many of whom have listened to him chat shit for hundreds of hours. He feels like a regular guy. Gillis may not have the polish many associate with great comedy. What he does have is authenticity. When it comes to diamonds, some are best kept in the rough.